We're just a few days away from the release of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, the next Borderlands game from Gearbox, and right now, a lot of you might be wondering, should I buy it?
Valentine, you've just drawn your own face over the character sheet?
It said draw your hero, and I'm my own hero.
Okay.
Honestly, a great question you can ask about any game, especially right now when there's just so many good things to play. How you spend your money and your time has never been more of a question.
A fallen tree bars your path. What you gonna do about it, huh?
I cast identify tree.
It's a species called Jumpus tutorialis, and weirdly, it only grows in this one valley.
Over the course of this video, I'm going to try to answer who probably should buy Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, who probably shouldn't buy Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, and what I thought of the review copy of the game that I was given by 2K and Gearbox.
Boss fight! I got a special figurine for this guy. 1 second. Rising before you is one of the Dragon Lord's most loyal undead soldiers. It's Rivula. Roll for initiative!
Before I get into the should you, shouldn't you type thing, let me just say that I get it. Other people's money is other people's money, and they should spend it or save it really however they want. There's always a chance that you're going to pick up the game and find out it's not for you, or you're going to skip the game and feel like you missed out. Take all advice, including and probably especially mine, with a real grain of salt. And one last thing I should probably say, this is advice that you should definitely take. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. So first, some disclaimers. At the time of this review, I haven't played the whole game or even made it to endgame. The pace that I tend to play games slowly, which is, taking a lot of time to do side quests and explore and things like that, doesn't really work very well for getting through a game in time to put out a review like this. All of my opinions are based on my 10 to 20 hours of play. I fought some main quest bosses, I fought some side quest bosses via side quests, I did a lot of exploring. All of my opinions are based on that perspective. Maybe I'll have different thoughts once I get to endgame, or once I roll a few more characters, but for right now, that's the perspective this review is from. If you're looking for reviews on things like endgame, I guarantee you there are plenty of great creators who have that content ready and available to talk about. So first, who probably should buy Tiny Tina's Wonderlands? Honestly, the first answer is just the easiest. Are you a fan of Borderlands? If so, I think this one's a no-brainer. It's not called Borderlands, but it is Borderlands. One of the things that surprised me very early in the game is that even though it's a fantasy game in a fantasy setting, you're pretty much still just using guns. The same weapon categories from all the other Borderlands games, snipers, SMGs, shotguns, those are all present. The action skills are different, but probably will still feel similar from the Borderlands games, and spells are basically the new grenades. They took the formula of Borderlands and applied it to a fantasy D&D type setting. Anybody who's played Borderlands will probably understand the skill trees too. You'll have lots of ways to make your Fate Maker more powerful, and I think they're going to look familiar even if the skills that you find in there are pretty new. Speaking of your Fate Maker, the customization options are extensive, and honestly I was happy to see inclusive. You even unlock more cosmetic options as you play the game, and you can go change how you look later if you want. It's probably a little weird that I've gotten this far in the review of a Borderlands game without mentioning loot. The series has always been about loot, and Wonderlands has as much as I have ever seen. Every single mission, I was dropping things I had previously looted because the game just throws so much loot at you. You can't possibly keep it all. Even the stuff that you're just trying to hold to sell. I found myself constantly dropping things that I was hoping to get some coins for because I had something else to pick up. That actually gets to a little thing that kind of got to me a little bit while I was playing. What if over the course of all of this loot, I was missing out on something really cool. The game, in my opinion, gives you so much loot that it would be almost impossible to stop and try it all, especially when you're trying to make a review like this in a hurry. So, there's a bunch of stuff that I picked up that was probably awesome that I never even got a chance to try. I probably picked it up and threw it back down a little bit later, or picked it up and just immediately marked it to sell because I just didn't have the time. The topic of loot gets us into the next group of gamers that might want to pick up this game. Fans of looters and shooters. The game is, after all, even though it's a fantasy game, a looter and a shooter specifically. And what it does as both of those, it does very well. Assuming that you like your shooters fast-paced and chaotic, and your looters with, like I said, just a whole lot of loot. Slow and tactical shooter fans, and people not comfortable with dropping or selling almost everything they pick up, might want to look to other games. Almost forgot, by the way. If you're a fan of the trademark Borderlands humor, I found a few things very early in the game that actually made me laugh out loud. The humor is still there.
The Fate Maker. That's you. Heavy, right? Fate Maker. Big responsibility. Honestly, I wouldn't even blame you if you just laid down in a puddle and gave up.
If that's what you're looking for from a Borderlands game, like maybe you're not even looking for the looter or the shooter aspect, you're just kind of looking for a silly game that'll make you laugh, this game does that like the rest of the Borderlands series does. Now let's talk about who probably shouldn't buy Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Gamers who aren't fans of Borderlands? That's probably the easiest way to answer that question. If you're not a fan of Borderlands, I don't know that you're going to like this game. Everything I covered before should make it clear. Even with the Dungeons & Dragons flair on top of it, it is still 100% at its core a Borderlands game. If you're not a fan of the series, I'm not sure the clever way they incorporate the tabletop feel through a location called the Overworld will be enough to change your mind.
I built you guys this big overworld on the table. Just move your miniature wherever you want to go on it.
Nice detailing on the landscape. Feels like there's a whole world just waiting for us to kill and loot it.
That's right! Welcome to my Wonderlands!
You spend some of your time on the Overworld, but it's mostly a way to travel between regions. There are quests and encounters that you complete specifically on the Overworld, and bonus points to them for making it so when you walk through grassy areas on the board, you encounter random enemies like a Pokemon game.
A battle jumps out at you! Random encounter! Ha!
No regrets!
Most of the game is played in non-tabletop, first-person shooter mode. If that's not what you're into, then the game might not be right for you. That being said, if you are specifically in it for the story and the humor and things like that, you can put the game on an easier mode that allows you to just experience the story and not worry too much about the fights. Other people who might not want to pick up the game, like I said previously, are fans of more tactical shooters. This is a fast-paced, chaotic, crazy, wild game, and you're constantly running around, constantly casting spells, constantly making things explode or catch on fire and stuff like that. If that's not what you're into, I would look for another game. And once again, if you're not into a looter that has just an insane, ridiculous amount of loot, just a ton, just an absolute lot of loot, if you prefer fewer and far between loot drops, then maybe other looters are going to be more your speed.
Collapses. Her Majesty reappears.
My thoughts from early access. I loved Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, but I've loved the Borderlands games from the beginning. I was a little surprised to see how much of a Borderlands game this is, and by the way, when I say surprised, here's the thing you should probably know about me. When I know I'm going to play something, I tend to not watch a lot of trailers and stuff like that for it. I like to experience it fresh. So, When we got to the point of the game where Tina basically says, "You're going to use guns," I was a little shocked because it was a fantasy game. I expected something different. But I love the Borderlands games. I always have. I've played all of them, so I love this game. It's a formula that works, and specifically, it's a formula that works for me. On full release, I'm going to play the game all the way through, including any side quest I can, and when I hit endgame, at that point, that's when I'll decide if it becomes a regular part of my schedule to grind, or if I'm just in it for the story. I don't know that yet. I wish I could answer that for you, but like I said, there are plenty of content creators who are going to have information about what the endgame is like, and whether they find it endlessly repeatable. I'm just not there yet. That's not how I play a game like this. I tend to play it more slowly. Even though I'm not at endgame though, I can say from what I've played, there's more than enough content in the story and side quest to cover that $60 price tag. By the way, I didn't really have any technical issues with the game, if that's something you're wondering. I don't think I had real problems at all. I was playing on my PC, which is pretty powerful, so unfortunately I can't really speak to the experience of playing the game on console or on different hardware than mine. But on my hardware, it ran well, it was constantly above 100 frames per second, so I enjoyed it. Some closing thoughts. If you like Borderlands, if you like looters and shooters, and if you like absolute pure chaos, then I think Tiny Tina's Wonderlands might be for you, like it definitely is for me. But if you're still not sure after watching this video, why don't you come find me on Twitch? I'll be playing through the whole campaign there, and maybe watching some of it live will help you make your decision. Thanks for watching, I really hope this helped. And once again, don't forget to subscribe and come find me on Twitch and Twitter.